Hi everyone, and welcome back to Waterhouse Forde. Today we're going to be reassembling the distributor for the TED20. Are you going to help me?
Maybe.
We'll have to see how we go. Hopefully we've got all the parts here. They've all been cleaned and prepared for reassembling the distributor. So here we have the main body of the distributor. The main shaft at the back here has a bearing. As I said in my previous video, that bearing is absolutely fine, it's perfectly smooth. I'm not concerned about replacing that at all. But because of the cleaning process, we do need to put some grease on it. So, grab a little bit of grease and pack the bearing. This is an open bearing, so it's easy enough to pack the grease in. We don't need too much. You don't want it flying around too much inside here, but just enough to keep it nicely lubricated. Can you give me a paper cloth, please, Oscar? Thank you. So I'm happy with that. Okay, now we need to oil this bush. Oscar, just a squirt of oil in there, please. Thank you. We'll just twirl that around so the oil can get all the way around. Down through the main body. It is a tight fit, and we will need to give it a little bit of a tap, preferably with a soft hammer. Go on, Oscar, give it a little tap.
I always think that this is Forde's hammer.
Some more?
Because it's shaped like his hammer.
Yeah. Yeah, you can hear that solid sound, so that's now in. And we can see over here, the hole for the roll pin has come through as well. Now that means that the bearing has also been seated down in the main body. So give that a spin, Oscar. How does it feel?
Quite good, except I can't spin it very fast.
It's a bit oily, isn't it? We'll just wipe out some of the oil inside here. That's fine. Right, now the next bit is the counterweights. They need to go around the shaft and onto these pins. I'm going to have to hold the shaft.
I'll zoom in, let's see if we can see this.
Get it on and then we can zoom in. Okay, you want to zoom in on that?
Okay.
You see how that operates, obviously. As the shaft spins, the weight is flung out. Let me get the other one on.
Can I see?
Okay. Get the other one on. Okay, so we've got them both in there now. The next bit is a little bit tricky, but this is the top shaft where the contacts run against. You can see the cam there. But these two pins here need to go into that hole and that hole there. So I'm going to need to fiddle with that. Okay, so you can see how that's now resting on top of those weights. With all of that in, we need to put the screw in the top here, which holds the shaft in. This screw has a hole through it. Don't know if you can zoom into that. And that allows you to put oil down the center of the shaft from time to time, which keeps the whole distributor lubricated inside. So we'll pop that in. Okay, that's nice and tight. You don't want to over tightening it. It's a soft metal screw, so you don't want to go too mad with it, but it does obviously need to be nipped up. So that's it, that's now in, and those weights will fling out when the shaft is spun. Now the next part is to lock all this in place by putting the bottom cam on. Now from the dismantling, you might recall that we made two witness marks, one on the end of the shaft and one on the face of this sprocket. Don't know if the camera can pick those up, but we should have one here and then one there. Just two little center pops with a center punch. Now what we need to do is make sure that those two are lined up like that. And the idea, or the reason for that, is if you look at this, these two dogs, as they call them, they're not 100% in the center of this circumference, and that's because it obviously has to key into the camshaft in order to keep the timing right. So now we need to get this roll pin in to the shaft. Now I might have to go off camera and do this in the vise, because that will offset, by necessity, has to be a very tight fit. Let's see how we go. Okay, that's beginning to go. Oscar, could you pass me a hammer, please? The metal one.
Where is that? My trusty hammer.
Okay, give that a little tap. Let's see if it'll go in without putting it in the vase. That's beginning to go. Okay, stop. Just make sure we're still lined up. Yep. Give it a little tap. Tap it a bit more.
I think it's going in.
It is. See if you tap it a little bit harder. Go on. Okay, let me do it now, please.
Yeah, that's going in. Definitely. There we go.
And there you are. That roll pin is now all the way in. And that has locked the whole unit together now. And we can now begin assembling the top. Okay, the next part is to install this base plate. The base plate is what the points run on, and also the condenser sits in there, and we also have the electrical post which runs through and connects to power. So there's quite a lot of detail on this one, and hope we'll be able to keep it all together. Now the way this connects, there are three screw holes here. But one of them is where the condenser sits as well, and holds the condenser in. And that screw is different to the other two. These are our three screws. We have a self-tapping screw, which is the one that goes through the condenser, and then we've got these two which go in here. I don't think that that's original, but that's how it was when I took it apart. So we'll get these two in first, and then we'll sort out the condenser. Okay, now we've got the base plate on. I think the next best thing to do is to try and get this electrical post installed, because that's actually quite finicky, so we'll try that. Now this is quite important. There's a number of parts to this. I'll put that screw back for a minute. We've got the bolt, we've got a plastic spacer, we have a nut which has an insulating washer on the bottom, we have another two nuts, and we have three washers. And finally we have a rubber grommet. And all of those need to go in pretty much in there. The plastic grommet, as you can see, has a flat side. That obviously needs to go down against the plate, fitting inside there. And then this bolt, you can see it's a square head bolt, and that has a faceplate on it. And that needs this flat piece needs to lie against the bottom of the base. Well, the whole objective here is this bolt and all the nuts, washers, everything has to be insulated from the body of the car, from the distributor, because we want to bring current in, connect it to the points, but not allow it to short out on the body. So we're going to try and get this in and lined up like that. Try and hold it in whilst we put all the different parts on. Now I'm not going to tighten this because we do need to get the end of the points in there, which we'll do in a minute. So put all the nuts on the post, and now we're going to install the points. The base plate needs to ride on this pin. Then there's an insulating washer, and then the points themselves. Now the points need to be sitting, that metal strap, the opening of the metal strap, needs to sit behind that square bolt head. And this is a bit tricky, but I will get it eventually. So at the same time as connecting it onto that post, we also need to get that metal strap onto and behind the square head of the bolt, just like that. The other thing that needs to go in there is the electrical connection for the condenser. Now the condenser sits inside there, and that electrical connection has to go on there. So we'll do that now. Okay, I made a mistake. We need to not put all the nuts and bolts, nuts and washers on, because we need to be able to tighten this down when all the electrical connections are on. So those are all in there now. So we'll tighten this up. Do you want to do that, Oscar?
No.
Okay, it needs to be tight, but you don't want to overdo it. These are small nuts and bolts. So just so it's nice and firm, just like that. Then we can put all the washers and nuts on, but I'll do that later. So now we need to screw everything down. We've got the two screws for the base plate, and we've got the screw that holds the condenser and ultimately holds the base, the bottom plate as well.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What's the condenser?
So the condenser is a capacitor. What the capacitor does is it stores up energy until it's needed. And when it's needed, in other words, when the points fire, it releases that energy very, very quickly. So it's a very high energy release. So it's like, if you think of a battery which is charging, and then when you use the battery, it releases its energy very slowly. The condenser stores up its energy and releases it immediately. So it goes from maximum charge to zero charge in a matter of microseconds. And that's what gives us our spark, which goes out to the spark plugs.
Okay.
So we'll get this condenser screwed down now. a little bit fiddly to get it to lie properly, but that's now in and is nice and firm. Just nip these up again, these base plate screws, just to be sure. That's fine. Right, now we can screw down the points. We won't set the points at this point because you need to do those when they're on the tractor. We'll get the screws in at least, so that they don't go missing, and so the base plate doesn't wander around. So there we go, that's what it all needs to look like when you're finished.
Hang on, let's get closer. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Now, as you can see, when the shaft turns, you can hopefully see the contacts moving backwards and forwards. Now, when they set properly, they will be closed when it's there, which is what they call the dwell, in between a high point on the cam. And when it hits the high point, they'll open, and that's where you get the spark, which releases the charge from the condenser. And so it goes on 4 times per revolution. Okay, so we can now pop all of these back on and put the rubber grommet on. And when this gets reinstalled on the tractor, the connection, a wire is connected here which runs to the coil. Okay, now we can put our nameplate back on. Now, an interesting thing about this nameplate, if you watched the previous video, I had a conversation with Bundy Bear around whether this distributor is the correct distributor for this tractor or not. And he advised that this tractor requires a D3A4 model distributor. This nameplate does have D3A4 stamped on it, but it also has 3 other numbers stamped on it. It's got 40146D, 125L or 1, I'm not sure, and a V129. So it would seem to me that this is a universal distributor which probably fits a number of different vehicles. But as we saw, it doesn't suit the distributor cap, and we will be looking to replace it. Hopefully we can find a proper D3A4 distributor. But in the meantime, we'll put this back and get it ready anyway, so it is restored, and probably put it up for sale. This just has 2 self-tapping screws which screw into the body, and 2 little spring washers. Okay, let's pop the grommet in. So that just pops over and makes this watertight seal around this electrical post. Okay, the next part is to put these clips back on. Now they just held on with these circlips, so we simply line that up, pop the circlip through, and bend over the end of the circlip, stop it coming out. Real simple, and that's really all you need. Do the other side. that, just to hold them in. And those clips obviously hold your distributor cap on. Now there should be a plastic cover that goes over here, and then the rotor goes on top. This distributor doesn't have that plastic cover, so we'll just pop that on for now. The final piece is to put this bracket on, which is what holds the distributor once you've set your timing. This holds it in place. I'm not going to tighten this because it would need to be positioned on the tractor properly when the tractor is when you install on the tractor. The other interesting thing to note, this has a washer with a tab on, and that tab needs to sit inside this slot. So when we put that in fact it's from this side. Sits inside that slot like that, and then you have a square nut which goes on here and is held by that cutout in the frame. I don't have enough hands for this. Let me put it down. Just like that, and I'm pretty certain that that will actually sit on that side, so that the adjustment is next to the nameplate. That's I imagine how it will sit, but we're not sure until we actually put it back. So what I'll do is I'll just tighten it up gently, just to stop it from falling off whilst this is in storage. And that is how to reassemble the distributor. I hope that you've been able to follow along, and hope that it's been helpful and informative, and we look forward to you joining us on the next video.
Hello, today we are going to learn how to make a tractor. First, you need a bonnet, a engine, steering wheel, wheels. Put them together, bang a bang boom. You're ready to ride.